Week 45, Day 1. Well, we're now here at the end of what we call Holy Week, and that's how we observe it in the Christian church. You know, a lot of times in the church, we go from Palm Sunday or the triumphal entry, and we skip over all these events and go directly to Easter and the celebration that is Easter. But we don't get Easter unless we go through these events. And so I would encourage you, if you are one who has commonly skipped the events during Holy Week, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, maybe even Easter Vigil on Saturday, consider going this year and living out for yourself the horrors so that we can appreciate the joys. Okay, off my soapbox. Today we're going to be reading from Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 75, Mark chapter 14, verses 32 to 72, Luke chapter 22, verses 39 to 71, and John chapter 18, verses 1 through 27. When we had left off last week, Jesus and his disciples had left the upper room and gone to Gethsemane. Well, in this story, we see the continuation as Jesus is there. Now, there's a couple of events and things, highlights, if you will, that we want to make sure we catch in this section. First of all, we might not be aware of, but Gethsemane is actually a word that means olive press. It was an olive grove, an olive vineyard, if you would, so to speak. And it had a press there where they would take those olives that were harvested and they would press it in order to get the oil that was used for lighting lamps. They didn't have wax candles in that age. They used oil for their lamps. But how appropriate that Jesus would go somewhere where he would feel the press and anguish of what is yet to come by going to a place called the olive press, the being pressed, that anguish that goes with it. And so he goes with all of his disciples. He leaves most of them. He takes Peter, James, and John, his inner circle, if you will, and he goes further into the grove until finally leaving them and going in even further himself. But before he goes, he asks them to stay awake and pray. And he goes in and he prays to God, and it says he comes back, he finds that they're asleep, and he admonishes them, couldn't you even stay awake? Now, we give the disciples a hard time, but keep in mind, they've just eaten a very large meal, and if it was indeed the Passover Seder, that comes with it 4 cups of wine. So the late hour and the wine and a big meal, think about how you feel after Thanksgiving turkey, right? Nonetheless, Jesus goes. And we see in Luke's rendition of this story that his anguish is so great as he thinks about what lies ahead for him that he actually bleeds tears. He cries tears, blood. There's a medical reason why that might be, which may have been what fascinated Luke about that particular story, him being a doctor. But nonetheless, it just demonstrates how incredibly hard this knowledge of what he was going into was, even for Jesus, knowing what the ultimate outcome would be. And it's here that Jesus chooses the path of obedience. He chooses to go. It may be here that we ultimately see Christ's sacrifice truly made, more so than on the cross. The cross is going to be hard. The arrest is going to be hard. The physical pain is going to be hard. But the choice was made here. He asked God, take this cup away from me. But if not, thy will be done. Jesus chooses to be obedient. I think that's true for most of us when it comes to hard things in our lives. It's not during the difficulty that we really have made the decision, but before that. Maybe you make the decision. I know I had to make a decision about leaving my comfortable, well-paying job to go to school for 3 years and potentially incur debt, and then have to live the rest of my life paying off that debt for seminary to become a pastor. That was part of the process. And there was a point where I chose to accept that outcome. Now, God had a different plan, and I managed to walk away from seminary without any debt, but only because of God. But I had made the choice prior to that I was going to go regardless of, in this case, the financial cost. For others, there will be a physical cost. There will be a cost in relationships. And it's not just about going into ministry full time as a pastor, but any of the things that we do. Do we choose at the time that we're going through it that we're going to do it, or do we make that choice ahead of time? A lot of times it's because we've agreed to be obedient to God that we can face the difficult times ahead of us. I don't know what difficult times are facing you, or even the ones that may be facing me all the time. But I have made the choice that I need to be obedient to God through Christ. And I rely on the power of the Holy Spirit to help me through. Sometimes I will be able to go through and obey just as I have hoped to. Other times I will fail. But the decision and what will most often determine my success is because I choose today and now to be obedient. Who are you going to choose to be obedient to? Jesus or yourself?